Welcome to the Opportunity Zones podcast. I'm Jimmy Atkinson. Coni Rathbone joins me today. She is an Opportunity Zone attorney based in Boise, Idaho, and a valued member of OZ Insiders. Coni, it's great to see you. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great.
Good. Well, it's been pretty exciting in our little Opportunity Zone industry since July. Have you been busy, or what's new over there?
I have been busy. We are still doing a lot of opportunity funds under Opportunity Zone 1.0. Those are tailing off a little bit now that the new program is out there, and people can see that if they wait until 27, they can get better terms. But the thing that I think I and a lot of people in the industry are focusing on right now is providing guidance and assistance to the governors and the economic development departments or the commerce departments in their state so that they can really select excellent areas to be in the new zones. The selection of those new zones are going to start mid-2026, go through September, and then will be applicable January 1, 2027. When the first program was designated, the governors and their economic development departments were kind of guessing about what this was going to be like and how it was going to benefit. And so they didn't have a lot of knowledge about how can this really benefit my state. And so some of the areas selected were great. Some of them were not so great. But this time
it's going to be a whole new ball game, right?
It's a whole new ball game.
Yeah.
And I'm working with real estate groups, commercial real estate brokerages to begin looking at the map of areas that are likely to be qualified and then lobby with their economic development departments and their governor's offices to get the areas selected, the 25% out of those qualified areas selected that they really believe could make a big difference if the economic development came there. So it's going to be...
I want to pick your brain on that a little bit later in the show, because I think that's a really important topic of conversation. By the way, we are recording this in late January, about a week before the ACS data is scheduled to be released. By the time this episode airs, that data may already be out, and we'll have the final list of eligible Opportunity Zone tracts. Again, the final list of the Opportunity Zone designated tracts won't be out until Q4 of this year, most likely, but we'll at least know what's eligible by the time this episode airs. But right now, we still are in kind of flux where we don't quite know. Let's circle back to that in a minute, Coni, because I want to get your thoughts on OZ 2.0 designation, and I also want to dive into who you're working with, who you're collaborating with there in the state of Ohio. But first, I want to talk about Las Vegas, because we were just with each other in Las Vegas at that big Novogradac conference, and you were also a member at our OZ Insiders dinner the night before. High level, what were your thoughts on the conference?
Well, the OZ Insiders is a great organization to give you a ton of information about opportunity zones. And I'll brag on you a little bit, Jimmy. Jimmy stays so up to speed on everything related to opportunity zones. Every time I have a question, I send him an email, and within an hour, he shoots back an answer or resources for me, which is great. The conference was really exciting. There was about 3 times the attendance at the conference than there have been in the conferences for the last several years, which really shows that people are paying attention this time. When the first one was passed, it was effective January 1, but nobody was really even paying attention till about March, and then it got a kind of a slow start. But this time people are really paying attention and hopefully really thinking about the areas that they want to have selected. The conference was great, as usual. The dinner, Jimmy's dinner, was excellent for networking. I talked with some folks about what their cities were doing to make the Opportunity Zone projects go more smoothly. And and got a lot of good information just from networking at that dinner. But then, of course, the conference had a lot of great information. I spoke on a panel about the new rural benefits that are available. As you might imagine, I'm licensed in Oregon and Idaho. I do opportunity zone work all over the country, but both Oregon and Idaho have a lot of rural. So that one is really important to me, and particularly because I have an opportunity zone project going in Burns, Oregon, 1,200 acres. And so we'll be able to set up funds that take advantage of the rural benefits, which will be great. And those are new in Opportunity Zone 2.0.
Right. And those rural benefits, just for those listeners and viewers who might be new to opportunity zones or might not be aware of the new rural benefits, pretty much there's two rural benefits. One of them
Right.
kicked in already. So
Right.
for investments into qualified opportunity funds that deploy their capital substantially into rural opportunity zones, the substantial improvement requirement
Right.
has decreased from 100%, where previously you had to double the value of the asset
Right.
in the fund, down to just 50%. So
Right.
that actually went into effect as of July 4th, 2025. That's available now.
Correct.
The
Correct.
other benefit that I think is going to be more widespread will be the benefit that accrues to investors in QOFs starting in 2027. If you invest in a non-rural QOF, you'll get a 10% basis step up at your
Right.
5-year deferral mark. That turns into a 30% basis step up for investments into qualified rural opportunity funds, or QROFs, as
Yeah.
some people are calling them.
Oh
So
my
those are the
gosh.
benefits there. But Connie, you spoke on that rural panel at
Right.
the Novogradac OZ Summit in Las Vegas
Mm-hmm.
back in December. What are some of the biggest takeaways that you had during that conference? What was discussed?
Well, on the rural panel itself, the second benefit you mentioned, the 30% step up in basis, that's really the most meaningful. The one that you only have to substantially improve 50% rather than 100%, that's great, but honestly, it's not going to be as applicable in rural, in my opinion, because in rural developments, you're often going to have bare land that you are starting from scratch and building something, and the substantial improvement requirements don't apply then. So there was a lot of excitement about rural, and rural is defined as being a city or a town with 50,000 people, or an adjoining area to something like that. And so there will be a lot of areas that are qualified based on census data in rural areas. But again, the important part will be to select an area where a developer or investors are willing to go. Some places in the desert in the middle of Oregon are not going to be developed no matter what the tax benefits are. And so it's really a kind of a fine line between selecting rural areas that are disadvantaged and qualified, but that have the characteristics that would bring a developer there to build a project. And so those are some of the rural issues. And then, of course, there's no regulations out yet. And we're hoping that regulations come before 2 years. Last time it was 2 years before the regulations were out. And so if the Treasury can get the regulations out more quickly, then the actual implementation of Opportunity Zone 2.0 will come along quicker and more smoothly. It is going to be a better program just from the fact that there's a lot of education out there now. I think people are really excited, and we saw this at the conference, that the big issue with 2.0 is that it is now permanent. And so a lot of the conservative CPAs that would advise their clients this is a temporary project or program. Don't invest your money in it because we don't know what's going to happen ultimately. Hopefully they're satisfied now with the permanency of the program, that they won't dissuade their clients from investing.
That's what I've heard over and over again is the
Yes.
permanence is the big deal. People who may not have wanted to invest resources or time into understanding the program, now they don't have a choice. This program's permanent. So
Right.
you better get on board because I think it's going to become, uh, hopefully it becomes at some point down the road, basically a ubiquitous
Yeah.
tax mitigation strategy where it's just a toolkit, a tool in everybody's toolkit
Right.
going forward. And I think the rural could be a big part of that for a certain class of investors. But I'm curious, Connie, in OZ 1.0, I think I read the other day some numbers from I believe it was AFPI provided me with this was only about 9% of investment had gone into rural designated opportunity zone
Mm-hmm.
census tracts, even though rural made up roughly a fourth of all of the OZs. And actually, I think it's more than that because I think it's over 3,000 of the 8,700 and change. Sorry, just
Mm-hmm.
doing some math on the fly here.
No
But my
problem.
point being, uh, not enough money went into rural OZs the first time around compared with how many rural OZs there are. So
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the reason why Congress came up with these plus ups, if you will, these
Mm-hmm.
additional benefits for rural. Do you think it's enough? Do you think moving the basis step up from 10 to 30% is enough to move the needle? We've talked already about decreasing the substantial improvement requirement from 100 to 50 might not move the needle that much, just because of the fact that so many rural OZ deals are development deals and don't even
Yeah.
have the substantial improvement requirement.
Right.
Points well taken there. So let's focus on the 10 to 30% basis step up portion. Is that enough? Do you think that's going to move the needle for rural?
Well, let me take you back a little bit from
Sure.
the 2.0. For the last at least 2 years, and I have a lot of conversations with sponsors, qualified opportunity fund sponsors, and attracting them to different areas. And for the last 2 years, at least, I have been saying, you guys need to focus on rural development because all over the United States, people are fleeing out of metropolitan areas to get away from the crime and to get away from a lot of the things that have been going on in our country for the last several years. And of course, the sponsors kind of pat me on the head and say, "Nice, Connie, that those don't return the returns like some of the downtown developments do." And so I think that the fact that the Congress specified rural, held out rural for additional benefits will force people to pay more attention to the rural. Of course, I'm going to continue lobbying them for rural as well, but I think just the fact of the benefits is going to have some impact on moving the needle. And then the issue about getting that 30% step up in basis when they pay their taxes is quite meaningful. Um, as when I was working on 1.0, and I would explain what the benefits were when they had to pay their taxes, and every time I would explain it, people would say, "Well, how am I going to get my money in 2026 to pay these taxes?" And I had a little bit of a sarcastic response and said, "Well, you know it's coming, so you can plan for it. But the other issue is if you can get your development done by the time it's time to pay taxes, you can do some refinancing and get money out of the project to pay their taxes." So, how we're going to pay those taxes is really important to people when they're going into this, because in the past, they're just accustomed to exchanging everything into a 1031 exchange and never having to pay the taxes unless they come out of it. So I think the special attention paid to it will move the needle, and I do think that 30% step up in basis will be quite meaningful.
Good. And you mentioned, during you were on that rural panel at the
Uh-huh.
Novogradac OZ Summit. I think one of the reasons why you were invited to be on that panel is because you are helping to spearhead a rural project that you mentioned
Right,
earlier in Burns, Oregon.
right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that project? You showed me some pictures of it when we
Yeah,
were together a few weeks ago in Vegas. There's stuff happening there. So
yeah, there is stuff happening
tell us
there.
about the project and tell us about which phase of development you're in right now and what the progress is looking
Okay.
like.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, the owner of this property is a 20 or 25-year client, one or the other. And we've been talking about this property for 25 years. It just so happened that this 1,200-acre parcel is all designated as an opportunity zone. Burns is rural Oregon. It's about halfway between Bend and Boise, and on the southern side of the state. And Burns died 35 years ago when the mill closed. Now, in support of my comment that people are fleeing metropolitan areas, the city manager of Burns was getting a call a week with a company that wanted to move there. But when they did their due diligence, there was nowhere to live and nothing to do. And so when we really started talking in earnest about it, and I learned that it was all in an opportunity zone, we came together and about 4 years ago started working on it in earnest to figure out how to take advantage of the opportunity zone benefits and other benefits that we might be able to pull together to build a city within a city to kind of light some development and some housing on fire for this small community. We've been quite successful at that. One of the reasons is because we hired a really excellent planner. And what we have done with this project is stacked benefit and incentive on top of benefit and incentive. And what I mean about that is that in every community, in every state, there are different incentives that you can bring to development. It is hard to pencil and to make profitable rural developments because they're far away. It's hard to get suppliers there. The number of contractors are fewer, et cetera. And so we worked with this planner to develop a number of different incentives to bring to the project, in addition to being able to have opportunity funds, a variety of opportunity funds working within the development. And I'll talk about that in a second. The incentives, there was still some COVID money out there. And so the incentives, the package of incentives included forming a rural urban renewal agency in Burns. And that provided full payment of the SDCs and is allowing a 7% cash back on each new home because counties and cities are really looking to find workforce housing and just regular single family housing because housing is one of the biggest issues we have in the United States. We've got the rural opportunity zone with all of its bells and whistles. There's an owner developer carry on some of the construction, etc. They created a regional rural revitalization agency that is getting money from the state, and that agency is headed by the planner, and he is using funds that are coming in through that agency for several different rural projects that he's working with. And then there are state agency incentives. There's a permanent loan guarantee program that will guarantee up to 90% of funds for a project. There's some additional grants and things within that. And so, as I said, every county and city and state will have different combinations of things. But what I hope people will really look at is how can I stack a group of benefits and incentives to make my project more successful? With this combination of incentives that our planner found, our first $10 million of infrastructure for phase one were entirely paid with incentive and grant money. So the first 10 million out of the box, the owners did not have to pay that. And as a result of that, we got a big kickstart, and there are 4 homes after all of these 20 years. There are 4 homes that are wrapped now and that are in construction. They're working on the interiors, etc. And let me tell you, when you go out to a piece of property that's been a field with sagebrush, for your entire participation with it, when there is infrastructure and the roads for phase one and houses going up, that's a pretty exciting development. And so by stacking those incentives, and then also we can talk for a minute about the manufacturing, the bonus depreciation for manufacturing. So think about a development that has 10 million in incentives to get the infrastructure for phase one. We're building houses, and we've talked, the houses we're using mass timber, which the best way I can describe how that works is it's like timber that's a Lego set that you snap together on site, basically. And it is very fast construction. It's less expensive construction. And so we're talking to the manufacturer of that about bringing a manufacturing facility to our property. If we do that, and if you look at other things in the big beautiful bill, there was a benefit for manufacturing. Trump promised to bring manufacturing back to the United States, which is why there is a provision in the big beautiful bill that allows for depreciation of 100% of the cost of your facility, your fixtures, and your equipment in the first year. Excuse me, I'm getting a little hoarse. So if you bring manufacturing anywhere in the United States and you spend $50 million on the facility, you can write off $50 million in year one. Now, let's say you hold that facility for 10 years. When you sell it, you have to recapture that depreciation, but you've been able to use basically Uncle Sam's money for that 10-year period. The way that works with opportunity zones is that you don't get to depreciate it in year one because the investors have no basis in the capital gains that they're investing. But when they pay their taxes, or when they personally guarantee a loan for development, they create basis and they can take the depreciation then. So if you're thinking about an opportunity zone program, they're going to invest it on January 1, 2027. They're going to pay their taxes in 5 years. And so in 5 years, they can take depreciation of 100% of the cost of the facility, equipment, and fixtures. And finally, at the end of the day, if they hold it for 10 years, there is that wow element, the 100% step up in basis. So because of that 100% step up in basis, there is no recapture of depreciation. So that is free money to the investors. So if you're looking at your returns, typically in an opportunity fund, you get 3 to 8% better returns because of the tax benefits. If you have a huge depreciation deduction that you don't have to recapture, and if you can bring a package of other incentives, free money to the project, then you have a project that is getting, and you teased me about this, crazy good returns. And that's my new legal term, is crazy good. It skyrockets the returns to the investors by carefully placing all these puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, because normally you're writing off a $50 million manufacturing facility, let's say. That's $50 million write-off against income.
Mm-hmm.
You sell it down the line in a non-OZ deal. Maybe you sell it 5
Right.
years later or 10 years later, and you owe a tax bill on that $50
Right.
million of depreciation recapture. That's taxed at, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's taxed at 25% typically. So you're looking at a $12.5 million tax bill.
Isn't it taxed in the normal tax bracket?
Some, I think some property is taxed at the normal tax bracket.
Okay.
Some is pegged at 25%. So we're
Okay.
we're out we're a little bit out over our skis right now because I'm not
Yeah,
100% sure
yeah.
about that. But
Because
you
you're
get the
not a
point.
tax lawyer and I'm not a tax lawyer,
That's right.
but yeah,
We'll have to get a tax lawyer or CPA on here
yeah,
to
there you
answer his
go.
question for sure. Right into the
But
show
yeah,
if we screwed that up. But the point being there's some sort of, you know, 8-figure tax bill that you're gonna end up paying on that
exactly.
$50 million of depreciation recapture. But because it's structured inside a qualified opportunity fund, if you make that sale after you've been in the fund for 10 plus years, that depreciation recapture is nothing.
Is
You don't
zero.
have depreciation recapture. That's a
Yeah,
huge, I've referred to it as the fourth hidden benefit of opportunity
yeah.
zones for several years here. It's not one that was publicized
It
very
wasn't. It
much
took a while
for a
for
long
people
time.
to
Yeah.
really get it. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
and
it did.
I think in the first 2 years of the program, the IRS hadn't really ruled on it one way or another until the final regs came out at the end of 2019. So yeah, it was kind of buried for a little while, but now
Yeah,
we're beating the drum on it. I think hopefully a lot of people are
yeah.
uh, are figuring that one out. You mentioned a moment ago for your Burns project, you're able to combine a lot of other incentives with that project. In your experience, what are some of the most common incentives that get stacked with the OZ incentives onto OZ development projects?
Well, I think that, if you are in the situation we have in Harney County and Burns, they were very, very positive about our project and wanted to help make it work. And that was one of the things I mentioned earlier about helping cities learn how to make the projects go more smoothly. One of the things that is always a huge help to developers is getting a waiver of SDC, system development charges, that would otherwise apply to a development. There are a lot of rural areas have urban renewal agencies that apply to them that have certain budgets that they can allocate to certain projects, and particularly if the projects are on the state's list of priority projects, such as housing. Um, there are they created the Regional Rural Revitalization Organization in our instance, which is called R3, and they were able to get grants from the state. So a lot of it is creating the organization, typically a nonprofit or a public-private partnership of some kind, to attract the dollars that are available within the state. Another one that you might be able to attract is federal money for women-owned businesses or disadvantaged businesses. And so it takes, and it's different in every state. So it takes somebody that's familiar with the state. The Economic Development Department in Oregon, it's called Business Oregon, and they are the ones that you can really go to and say, okay, what is the vast amount of things out there that we might be able to qualify for in this project. I know that there is often money available with if you are working with Indian tribes, and our Burns project has a tribe right next door. And so we've been exploring that. In that instance, the tribe has not been willing to move as quickly as we wanted to. So we don't have anything worked out yet, but I expect that we will. And then there is federal money that can be achieved if you are working in concert with a tribe. So every state's going to be different. I'm more knowledgeable about Oregon's because I practiced law there for 35 years. I'm becoming more knowledgeable about Idaho. I'm working on my 4th year of practice here, and so knowing who to ask to find out the buffet of incentives that could be available for your project is really a key. And then having people that are knowledgeable about the area go to the economic development director of Nampa, Idaho, and say, this is coming. How can we help? How can we help you maximize the benefit? How can we help you lobby with the governor's office to get more zones in your city or county? How can we work with the cities to say, developers, we are friendly. Here's the basket of things that we're willing to provide in terms ordinances and waivers of certain requirements. The SDCs is a big one. It's fairly easy for them to waive, but they don't want to because that's where they make a lot of their money. So you've got to meet the criteria of their preferred projects.
Right. So, end of the day, I'd say just based on everything you told me, my recommendation would be if you're developing a deal, whether it's maybe moving a business or opening up a new small business or developing a real estate project, you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you don't call the city, call the county, call the
Absolutely.
state, and try to determine, is there free money out there that I can incorporate into the capital stack for this deal?
Mm-hmm.
Because you might not even know, but there might be grant money available for the type of thing you're working
Exactly.
on from some sort of local, state, or federal government agency. I think
Right.
that's a great tip there, Connie. I'm glad that it
Yeah.
sounds like you've taken advantage of $10 million. It sounds like in
Yeah,
Burns,
there we
Idaho,
go.
to get that going. That's pretty cool.
Well, and Jimmy, back when I started practicing law 100 years ago, Oregon had what they called the Oregon Economic Development Department. And I worked for many years on putting Japanese manufacturing facilities in Hillsboro. Now, Hillsboro is a suburb of Portland. Why Hillsboro? Well, because their city government was very pro development, where Portland's was less development friendly. And so the economic development department had all of this information on the different kinds of things that were available. So I'd start that questioning with the state, find out who their economic development specialists are. Maybe it will be an economic development department, maybe it'll just be the commerce department, but they're going to have someone in the state organization that is responsible for this. And some states are going to be better than others. But man, when we were working with the Oregon Economic Development Department, they were excellent, and they had people on the ground lobbying and negotiating for these things for our manufacturing facilities. So that is my first place to start, and then figure out who in the state is involved in economic development and how they can help.
Great advice. I love it. Listeners out there, please take that advice. You're doing
Yeah.
yourself a disservice if you don't. All right, let's round out our conversation by revisiting what we already teased early on, which was Opportunity Zone 2.0 is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that this year, the second half of this year primarily, is when states are going to be nominating
Right.
eligible census tracts to the Treasury Department for certification or designation as Opportunity Zone tracts. That map taking full effect January 1 of 2027, as you laid out so nicely a few moments ago, Connie. You're working very closely with the Idaho Economic Development Association up there
Right.
in the great state of Idaho
Right.
uh, to advise them on their nominating process. And I'm sure you have clients of yours and other stakeholders in the state who are all clamoring for, I want this track to be a zone.
Right.
I want that track to be a zone. How has that process been like? And I guess if you could offer a bit of advice for a developer or an investor
Mm-hmm.
or a local community stakeholder, maybe not just in Idaho, but anywhere in the country, if they
Right.
want to make sure that their community or their particular census tract has the best chance of getting nominated,
Right. Right.
what would you advise them to do at this
So
point in
first,
time?
first of all, I'm trying to create the buzz, the clamoring for the selection of certain areas by teaching about these kinds of things in commercial real estate brokerages and other folks in the community that are involved in economic development, teaching the Economic Development Association, and there's 4 of them in Idaho that I'm going to be working with to try to help them see that they should be proactive. And so I think you should be communicating with probably primarily commercial developers and commercial real estate brokers to brainstorm what the areas are. You can take the maps that are available with Novogradax and ESG and have a really good idea of the areas that are going to be qualified and even the areas that are going to be rural, and study the map and identify the areas where you think the best development will be. And then it's a matter of lobbying the governor's office and whomever the governor is assigning the selection process to, lobbying them for the areas. Now, that lobbying needs to include things such as what is going to be requested in the reporting requirements. For example, if you can demonstrate that this will bring a new tax base in the amount of $5 million to the county. If you can demonstrate, although not a requirement, if you can demonstrate that it's going to create 300 jobs, if you can demonstrate that it will raise the property values of the area by X amount, those kinds of tangible improvements, I think, are going to be very meaningful to the governor's offices. And I say that broadly, the governor's offices, the economic development departments, in saying, yes, this is where we can do it. And in addition to that, I think that in the lobbying, the information about why this area would be successful in its development versus something that's in the middle of nowhere where no one can get to it, that might be identified as a zone. And so it's kind of like when you're doing a pitch deck for a real estate development and you're going to be trying to attract investors to come in. That's the same kind of product that you should put together, a marketing package or a pitch package. That's the same kind of product you should put together for the area you want selected, to demonstrate to the governor why, if you select this area, it will be a success, and here is why.
I think that's brilliant advice. And we're going to have a lot of resources on our website at opportunityzones.com. Basically, each state's going to operate differently. They're going to have their own process. I'm going to try to, a little bit later, probably this spring, have a list of every state, and with every state, directions or a contact, or at least a link to the website of the department that's responsible for Opportunity Zone designation. Right. At this point in time, only a handful of states have figured that out. There's a few states that know which department's going to be in charge, or they've publicly announced it. But we're working with a handful of states and we're going to be researching all of the states to make sure we get that list out to you. And great advice to check the maps that Novogradac and EIG have put together that will, and by the time this goes live, we'll have probably that official list of eligible census tracts. Yeah, that's right. For that OZ 2.0 designating process. Coni, it's been great chatting with you today. Before we go, if there's anybody in our audience who's interested in reaching out to you, maybe they want to learn more about your law practice as you are a very experienced and expertise, I would say, Opportunity Zone attorney, or if they want to learn more about your Burns, Oregon project, how can they reach out to you? What's the best way to find out more?
Well, and something else that I'll offer is I am always happy to brainstorm with people about opportunity funds and opportunity zones free of charge. So give me a call. I have a 165-page packet of information that we'll send to you free of charge. It talks about Opportunity Zone 1.0, 2.0, and it has cheat sheets for each of them inside of it. So that's a really handy thing to have on your desk if you're going to be answering questions. But they can email me at Rathbone, Rathbone, at V as in Victor, F is in Frank law.com. And I'm happy to send our packet to anyone that is interested in it. And like I said, I'm happy to talk with you on the phone. I'm happy to help people in a variety of states with getting a program set out and helping them educate their state and their cities and their economic development departments about how they can make the process attractive to developers to come to their areas and do the developments.
Well, perfect. Coni, again, thanks for joining me today. For our audience out there today, if you enjoyed today's episode, hit that like button, give us a thumbs up, and we will, as always, have show notes available on our website at opportunityzones.com/podcast. If you want to read more about today's episode, we'll have links to all of the resources that Coni and I discussed on today's show. Be sure also to subscribe to us on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening app to always get the latest episodes of the Opportunity Zones podcast. Coni, thanks again. It's been great catching up with you today. Thanks for joining the show.
You're very welcome. And thank you as always, Jimmy.